We welcome you all, Professor, here. Today, we are going to discuss specifically on the futures of the research, specifically open sciences and collaboration among universities to address global challenges. As we embark on the discussion, let us first reflect on the transformative power of open sciences. Open science encompasses principles of transparency, accessibility, and inclusivity, fundamentally changing the way how it was research done earlier. It's disseminated and it is utilized in a very different way. It promotes the share of the data, the methodology, the finding, and the fostering greater reproducibility. Efficiency and impact also plays a very important role there. By breaking down traditional barriers to knowledge, open science enables collaboration not only within academia, but also with stakeholders from the diverse sector and community. Now, in these days, universities are facing a critical responsibility to address pressuring global challenges through open science practice and collaborative research initiatives. Categorized by the principle of transparency, accessibility, and reproducibility, open science can help advance global knowledge and make the benefit of this knowledge generated by the researcher to wide principle and publicly available research, which is not maybe available for on non-payment basis. Such as collaboration can accelerate the process and progress towards more sustainable and equitable future in areas including climate change, healthcare, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development. Besides sharing the cost elements, both financial and intellectual, cross-country collaboration also improve acceptability of the research finding and brighten chances of policy suggestions. I'll not take more time, but let me set the tone by setting that moreover, the collaboration among the universities plays a vital and pivotal role in advancing research and global challenges. By pooling expertise resources and prospective universities can tackle complex issues in a more holistic and interdisciplinary manner. Through joint research project, exchange program, and share infrastructure, universities can amplify their collective impact and drive meaningful change on the globe. But question arises that how can universities wade through these challenges and do what they do want to the best in terms of producing quality research for helping the mankind to understand the world as a better way. I would like to request to put a light on the concept on this future of the research, open sciences. I would like to request Professor Prakash to just put a few light on the topic.
All right, thank you. I missed the first part of your introductions, just giving you a little bit context about where I come from and my thoughts about open research, research collaborations, and why we are in just such a fantastic opportunistic time to make a difference in the world. My first 28 years of my life was, I was a researcher in India and then moved to Europe for 6 years doing research there. And for the last 22 years, I've been in Alaska at a high-end research university. I'm at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is one of the northernmost universities in the United States. And it is a university that is in the top 7% of the research universities, and we're heading to being in the top R1 category, which is like 3.7% of the US research universities. The focus of the research at our university is, being in the Arctic, it is very heavily focused on climate change, but there is also, and its impacts and what you see today in global challenges is that and a phenomena, an event or activity in one part of the world definitely impacts everywhere. It's not limited to a place. The challenges also that are in the world are getting more and more complex, and they require an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach, but also very, very different perspectives in resolving some of the issues. So I think research plays a really critical role. It is the engine that drives that progress. It's the engine that finds the solutions. And it is also important to realize that by making those progresses and those taking those steps, research is also an economic driver. It's a big economic driver. And so research basically is fundamental to our progress. Research, the kind of complexities we are seeing and the kind of problems we are addressing requires that collaboration, requires that global collaboration. And there is no better time than today to collaborate. Our platforms, our processes, our opportunities have increased manifold. A few decades ago, we could not think of collaboration the way that we can think about it now. And that is important to recognize and take that opportunity. Children that are growing today, they start their lives being connected with through the internet to everywhere in the world. They are more knowledgeable, they are more aware of what's going on. And those connectivities that they are so used to, that was so difficult in the past, are just really, really easy now because it's what we see, what we expect, and we know how to navigate. The third point over here is why open science? And we've seen the progress in open science. We've seen how things that were just in journal publications that were hard to get are out there in the open source world now. Software packages are in the open source world. Literature is out there in the open source world. If we kind of become one of those who just keep our research to ourselves, and those who will keep it will become archaic. The ones who share it openly are the ones that are going to progress. So the key to collaboration, the key to really good research, impactful research, is through open collaboration. There will be time for discussions later, but I would like to say one thing is that I am just amazed at the new educational reforms that have happened in India and that are continuing to happen, that for the Indian audience today, collaborating is far easier than what it was even just about 5 years ago. The new education policies make it easier for us to collaborate academically and in research. And so I just think that we are at such an exciting time, at an exciting junction, where we really need to have open dialogues like the kind we are having today to see how we capitalize on these opportunities and move forward, because there are enough challenges out there that we need to resolve and that we need to find a solution for going forward. So I'll stop at that and I'll let the others chime in.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. Thank you very much. I would like to request Professor Samuel to put light on this topic scene.
Thank you, Professor Pandey, for that introduction. To give a brief about my university, which is predominantly a health sciences university, Vinayaka Missions Research Foundation, based in the southern part of India. The focus on this new areas pertaining to the open research, open science research, is something requires more deliberation in terms of when it comes to health sciences. Definitely after the pandemic of COVID, I think it has raised a lot of concerns in terms of how this open science research can be accelerated. Nevertheless, there also comes some sensitivity which could be very specific to patient health information or some health-related data which cannot be shared or need to be shared with some regulations. So given this context, there are a few areas that I would like to emphasize upon when it comes to the open science research. I think I was also looking in terms of how UNESCO is trying to put some framework and guidelines together, primarily more of a guidelines, in terms of how this open science research can be adopted more globally and can definitely benefit with regard to the need which is seen for this particular point of time, given the climate change and also with regard to the other environment impacts that is happening, and also in line to how we can successfully implement the SDG goals globally. Said that, few points I would like to put across to the panel to ponder about. One is, I think there need to be a specific initiative in terms of how we could develop an open science research maturity framework, because this is something that we are starting at this point of time. And I think putting some thoughts around clearly defining a maturity model in terms of how we could specifically look in terms of the open access with regard to data, with regard to the reproducible research, the scientific evaluation, or the science policies and the science tools, I think it's imperative that we develop one maturity framework so that it comes with much more defined way of progressing and instilling confidence, be it with regard to transparency, collaboration, or with regard to accessibility and innovation. The second is also, apart from the maturity framework, a focus point with regard to ensuring more of a qualitative assessment. Because once we open up this, I'm trying to draw some parallelism with regard to the open source software, how it impacted a decade before and how things are getting evolved and getting more shaped in terms of better access for using the right open source material that is available. So having a qualitative assessment or a framework, qualitative assessment with regard to some checks and balances, with regard to whatever goes as a specific inputs on the open source, open science platform would be one important thing that we need to look into, along with the integrity part when it comes given the health sciences or maybe some very specific sensitive data that need to be looked into. So with these 3-4 pointers, I would like to further continue the discussion after hearing my panel colleagues on what they think about this, the framework, maturity framework, and some sort of a qualitative assessment, and also how do we ensure the integrity with regard to transparency, collaboration, and accessibility. So there I will stop.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you very much. I would like to request Professor Derrick.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I certainly concur with my prior two colleagues. And just to get started, a little bit of a way of introduction as well. So I am from the US, and I spent the first part of my career there, about 20 years doing research in neuroscience. I've been in India now for about 5 years. So it's been interesting to see the approach to research and perhaps some of the opportunities and availability to the resources that are out there. So I know we're talking a lot about open science, which I think is a fantastic idea, right? To bring more research results to the masses. But I do think that there are still a lot of challenges associated with it. I would say number one is the accessibility. While there is certainly a push towards open research and open science, the fact is much of the research that is out there is still behind paywalls. And I would say that it's difficult for any university to access, but certainly in the global north, as we say, the University of Fairbanks and my own institutions back in the US, they were large enough and they had sufficient funds that they were able to pay those fees and you had pretty good access. I would say that here it's a little bit more challenging. And so there is a higher dependence on the open science, that is those articles that you can access without the pay fee wall. And I do think that there's still a lot of progress that could be made with respect to the accessibility of the current research. I also think that there is a lot of room for growth in terms of ensuring that those scientists that come from, again, the so-called global south have access to these top-tier journals. You know, there is a lot of research out there showing that it's much more challenging for researchers from the global south to publish in those journals. And I think that we need to be able to ensure that there is more equitable responsibility with respect to who we're taking on. And I think a lot of that comes down to the journals themselves in terms of having diversity with respect to their editors, their associate editors, and the journal articles that they're looking at. Now, I acknowledge that one of those problems is that sometimes the science, the rigor of the science is not universal. And so we certainly need to do our best to ensure that the science as it is remains rigorous and top tier. But nonetheless, we need to ensure that there are opportunities for those outside of, we'll say, North America and Europe in order to publish in these journals. I think China has certainly done an example of this. There's a well known that they are the top publishers of any country in the world today. And they have certainly put forth many journals across many fields that are well recognized for, again, establishing and showcasing really top tier research. The other thing I would want to say is when we look at the opportunities, and this is something I've seen here in India, the money that is available, we'll say through grants and other means, again, just isn't to the same level. And so it makes it a little more challenging to do really broad-based research that does require a lot of funding. I certainly think cross-country research is a great idea, but even there are a lot of impediments. I know from a lot of my own faculty members that when they try to work with universities and institutes, say in Europe or North America, just the way the funding process is done here is different, and therefore it throws up a lot of roadblocks in terms of being able to secure that funding quickly, and ultimately whether you can or secure it at all. So again, it's something that we've been really struggling with here for a while. And then finally, and I don't want to take too long, I'll turn it over. Something I'm interested in, I think is worth considering, is open science, open research is a fantastic idea, but how far does it go? You know, I do know that you can go further. There's a lot of ideas in terms of open notebook, for instance. The idea that all science from the earliest stages should be made available to all researchers. And as a past neuroscientist, I think that, again, in theory, that might sound ideal, but in terms of securing your own ideas and your own research program, I do think that there may be some challenges associated with that. So my point being, well, I think that the idea of openness and transparency is certainly one that we want to pursue. I do wonder where that line lies with respect to where we kind of clamp down and say, no, this is for me versus what I'm willing to share. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. I would like to invite my dear friend, Professor POPOVSKI.
Thank you very much.
Professor Provost.
I would like to say that open science really helped, and I personally experienced this over my academic life. I published over 20 books, and my only concern was when some colleagues will ask me, can we get this chapter or the whole book because the price of the publisher is very high. And I never really worried about sharing anything I would publish. And it will be only the policy of the publisher, which will tell that for the first 18 months, we want to sell the book at that price, then we can maybe drop it. For me, the royalties were never a consideration, how much royalty I will have from publishing. And I was very happy to share everything I've ever written to anybody who would ask me, unless there were these restrictions by the publishers. And for me, open science, open access, open data were really excellent news. I feel much better now than 10 years ago. And I think the world is moving there. There should be definitely no restrictions to share data. In fact, most of the journals now also have open access. A lot of universities encourage their faculty to also publish in open access. In fact, I will say many funding agencies in their grants also include the provision that part of the money that will give to researchers will require publishing in open access, which all I think of those are excellent news. Why not? If somebody give us money to do research, why should we not share that research with everybody in the world? So for me, open science, open access, open data was an excellent news. The only concern I have, it didn't come earlier. It should have been done much, much earlier. But finally, we get there. We have the UNESCO recommendation in 2021. We have the European Commission, which is also a pioneer in adopting the open science policies. We have this Plan S, which is a group of research funding bodies, the donors, associated also with the European Commission, with the European Research Council, mandating open access for publicly funded research. And they encourage institutions to go open. As my previous colleague said, it also helps the collaboration and even the peer review, because when journals require open peer review, That also makes it very quick. It accelerates the process of research. It accelerates the process of publishing, dissemination, but also utilization of existing research. In fact, we see already researchers able to share manuscripts via preprints, via platform, such as bioRxiv, MedRxiv, and other, to make it faster to disseminate. It was very useful. Remember COVID-19, when laboratories and research institutes had to share quickly every test they've done, and that helped a lot. Many people are surprised why so quickly the vaccination has been approved, and the answer is only because of open access, because of open data, because everybody was really in solidarity with the other unit. Nobody wanted to keep it for themselves, rather to share quickly the result of the experiments and testing to make that available much faster. And the second reason was also a lot of volunteers were happy to be tested on the COVID vaccine, and that's why we have a vaccine approved over 2 years instead of the usual 5 to 10 years period, which kind of raised it a lot of conspiracies around the world. But the science was very, very, very clear about that. Again, as I said, I'm very happy that journals experiment with open peer review. The open science also facilitate collaboration and crowdsourcing research. Many institutions and funding agencies require researchers to adhere to the practices like publishing in open access journal, innovations in publishing such as the Diamond Open Access to address exactly the financial and ethical issues in traditional publishing, and the data sharing standards and best practices to ensure quality, consistency, interoperability of shared research data. Government funding agency increasingly adopting policies to promote open access, and they require researchers also to make their findings openly accessible. So in a way, I understand some concerns, and obviously we need to think about the challenges. DERICK mentioned some of those, like data privacy, intellectual property rights, how sustainable some of the open access model will be. But I think these are small problems. They can be resolved and we can move forward. Of course, there will be resistance from publishers who want to make a lot of money. Of course, there will be some predatory publishing, some issues of data privacy and security. But again, all this can be really solved in a very cooperative way. So I'm very optimistic that the open science is going to flourish even further. To exactly as DERICK pointed out, the point is that we shouldn't keep anything for ourselves. Everything which, especially if it was externally funded, especially if we have grants and research money to spend. Obviously, in that case, we shouldn't keep anything for ourselves. Let it be open for the rest of the world and not worry much about privacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Popovsky. The discussion embarked on some questions that how can these universities in economically developed nations pave the way for the global access to the research outcome, breaking down barriers imposed by a high publication cost. I would like to request Professor Prakash, Professor Anupma Prakash, to put on light this, because this is an embarking question that what is the role of these developing nations universities, and how these universities economically, which is then to economically developed nations, can pave the way of the global access to the research outcome, which can break down the barriers imposed by the high publication cost. Professor Prakash.
Yeah, Dr. Pandey, that's a great question. It's a complex question. Every university within its funding models allocates resources to its research. But anywhere in the world you go, you'll see the same issue is you'll feel like what is needed for the research to advance, the allocations are always less than what you think is needed for that advancement. There are universities in Europe, for example, that just kind of, if you're following the recent trends, some universities where they've said, don't worry of individual grants paying for an open access publication. The university itself makes a deal with the publisher, says, any of my faculty publishing with your company, that access is going to be open. That's one model, but that's not a model that's replicable around the world. Not every university can follow that model. It needs a very robust research funding to get into something like that. But I do think that the research becomes more open, more accessible if we have incentives in place. Our current system is such that we are rewarded for publications in these specialized journals that are peer-reviewed, that are high-cost journals. The peer review process works from people, the researchers do that voluntarily. The data is public data. Basically, it's coming from the research, from federal funding, from state funding. But the processes are such that they incentivize that model. So the publishing companies also work. They've kind of worked that system where they know this is what is important for the researchers, so they will do it. If we incentivize open source publishing, in the same way, when I'm saying open source is different from open access. Open source is where there is no payment for you to put up there, whether it's through voluntary sites, if it's like also software codes that are out there. If we start recognizing those things in evaluating our faculty, in moving forward, in making those and incentivizing open source and giving that the quality open source material the same value as that of peer-reviewed publications, at some point you'll start seeing the shift in culture and shift in the needle. That's a lot more rooted in our culture, in our policies, in our incentives, the way we move forward. It takes a sea change to make that kind of a change. If you look at what universities are doing nowadays, and especially as younger researchers are coming, even for our, say, graduate research, when our graduate students do a thesis, besides publishing in journals, we require them to make their research available in formats that are accessible and openly understandable to a larger public. We ask them to, say at our university, do a 3-minute thesis, encapsulate your thesis essence in 3 minutes and publish that. That is something that is accessible to anybody. And what it does is it gives an opportunity for people around the world to then connect with you. Just small steps, but they are important on how we make it accessible. We also, within our research results in actually training and academic curricula, we also make that open access. Not everything, but for example, there was this wave of MOOCs, which were massive open online courses. At our university, we do run an Alaska X program where you can take any course from anywhere in the world for free. And you only have to pay a token amount if you want a certification of completion. So if you just Google Alaska X and UAF, you'll see that popping up, and you can take these courses. And many of these are just derived from research. So as you may, and these are in specialized areas. These are not just a general science class that is made open access. These are classes in our top research areas like remote sensing, GIS classes, specialized classes on thematic areas on how to process a certain type of data. When you start making those things accessible, what you do is you open doors for a global audience to start using that in research. Those are smaller ways, but every step in making things open, research open, accessible, and just the knowledge over there being shared freely, that makes a difference in the way we're thinking about research. So Dr. LINDQUIST said, and he's right, there are so many challenges, and those challenges are rooted in our older practices of publishing and incentivizing publishing. What we have to look at now going forward is how do we change those models and how do we just put our data and our research out there in a way that is then also respected and valued.
Absolutely, absolutely nice, ma'am, because this is what require a policy change. And the wave of the MOOCs has changed the entire dynamics. It's a wonderful idea that the 3-minute thesis, even in JGU, we are doing it out now. We are doing one step ahead now, that whatever publications is there, outcomes of the research should be an social implication or policy implications. So it should not be merely to be published in the journal, but what outcome is there from the research, which is applicable to the society. That is the importance of the research. So you are absolutely right that we need to create a different platform, different type of strategy, different type of policy framework to overcome this problem. Thank you for your valuable input, ma'am. There's another question which has been asked to us, that is there a support for the propositions that knowledge generated through university research, especially when backed by public finance, should be accessible to humanity for free? If yes, what should be the universities to do to ensure that open science become the norms of the future generation, future research endeavor? And as university leaders, how do you ensure this integration of open sciences initiative into the core values of your own institution, fostering a culture of transparency and collaboration? I would like to request and invite Professor Samuel, who is actually working as a board member in a university, in a system. I think he's the right person to put light on this. So I would like to request Samuel ji, if you can put light on this.
So that's a quite long question, Professor Pandey. And in fact, if you primarily look into this open science research, there are 3 core components what I look into. One is with regard to the open output, and second is with regard to the open infrastructure, which need to be supported by cultural change. So when we talk about the global south, where we are also part of the global south, where we have been constrained by what we heard from Professor Lingwitt and also POPOVSKI, with regard to funding or with regard to a collaboration and support, and with regard to the publication challenges, I think we need to start building in an atmosphere or an environment which will start supporting the open outputs, open infrastructure, and cultural change. This I say that because one of the important thing is how you adopt open access policy. That is something that need to be freely available. The accessibility to the research materials and publications and the data. These policies can be implemented at an institutional level or mandated by funding agencies. So this is something is very important. Second, the emphasis on infrastructure and support. I strongly believe that we should invest in the infrastructure and support system to engage an open science practice. This includes maybe open access publication fees, developing institutional repositories, and also offering training of resources and likewise. So the infrastructure and support becomes an important aspect wherein it also brings in a cultural shift or a change wherein people are able to adapt some of these new practices, particularly the young generation who are getting into the research. This is very important because they normally look in terms of how things have been done in the past and how they can quickly adapt to some of the new things. The another thing at a university level, what we can think is to promote more collaboration on multidisciplinary research or interdisciplinary research. Because we predominantly being in health sciences university, we do have a good focus with regard to law, engineering, and also with regard to social sciences. Said that, I think more encouraging on this interdisciplinary research will result in terms of some of the collaboration on the key components of open science. This may also go to an extent of in Global South, probably to incentivize these researchers to get into this model of interdisciplinary research. Couple of more points. What I'm also thinking is, one is with regard to the education and training, like what I said is important. Nevertheless, this open science principles into evaluation and promotion criteria. This is where I already emphasized that coming out with some sort of a maturity framework, wherein we tell that to start with, when you get into open science research, probably you are just getting into an initial level. And as you grow and as you mature, and as you put the necessary processes in place, which will help in terms of better support with regard to data security or with regard to support to finance and everything, you get into a more defined way of doing some open sciences and then getting into something more managed and optimized. So some sort of a framework based on the guidelines, what has been promoted, given by UNESCO. These things would really help at the university level to get certain things aligned for a better jumpstart on the open science research. So that is my few cents at this point of time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you. Thank you very much, specifically for highlighting the infrastructure and support related issues, highlighting the evaluation and promotion criteria need to be accessed. And it is really important that how we look from the global south, what type of funding support, what type of publishing challenges we are facing. You're absolutely right that this is not a single domain problem. We have to think from the many different dimensions to address this particular issue. In spite of some few steps has been taken, but still there's a long way to go. And this is what the responsibility of the university leaders and the system and the policy makers to ensure the pave of this type of journey. So there's another question which it's an interesting question that in the face of this economic constraint, now you said that funding availability or funding support is in crunch. Yes, definitely it may be in crunch. But in the face of this economic constraint, how can universities in developing nation actively participate in global research collaboration while ensuring fair and equitable benefit for their researchers? That's a big challenge. And I would like to request Professor DERICK to put light on this, that how come these economic constraints which has been faced by the universities, specifically in the developing nation, can actively participate in the global research collaboration. Professor DERICK, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Professor Pandey. Well, I think it's an important question and certainly a challenging one as well. To highlight a point I think a number of my colleagues have made, I think one of the more critical and important issues is the economics and infrastructure. With respect to economics, I spoke earlier in terms of accessibility. And I think Professor SURESH just mentioned article processing, but those article processing charges can be quite significant. And that's, of course, just to publish in the journal. In order to make it open access, you have to publish first. I am happy to say that some journals, not all, but some journals are willing to waive those fees for researchers from the Global South. But again, it can be economically challenging for some researchers, again, particularly from outside the Global North, to be able to afford and take advantage of the opportunity to publish in some of these journals. I think with respect to the infrastructure, I think that there is a growing awareness of the importance of research. And I think Professor PRAKASH talked about this quite eloquently at the beginning. I will say in India, for instance, I'm a dean of psychology. Historically, there's been a lot of emphasis on the treatment side of psychology and the applied side of psychology, meaning you take psychological principles, apply them to the world of business or the criminal justice system. But there is a growing recognition of the importance of need of research. And I think that this is a little bit of a mindset change. Because for a lot of our students, and I will perhaps generalize, I hope this isn't unfair, but I think this may apply outward as well, that the perception is, well, there's already all this research, what's the need or what's the importance? And so I think sort of building that from the ground up. And this really has to come from the higher education institutes and, of course, the governments to support them, to say that research is something that we find important and something that we're willing to actually invest in, and to be able to put that infrastructure in place where researchers from the Global South can actually complete research of high quality that, again, can then be shared on the with the international community. So I think that that is something that is growing, and I hope that that will continue to grow as we move forward. I would also say that there has to be kind of an openness, a recognition, or rewarding the idea of open science and transparency throughout universities. And I think this is true worldwide, but of course, this is particularly true here in the Global South. So I think as you bring people in, it's the idea of laying down the expectations in terms of what the research will entail and ultimately how it can be disseminated. And as Professor Pandey was just saying, I think it's not just publishing the research and you're done, but it's actually looking at how can you apply this? What is the real world ramifications of the importance? And I think that the United Nations, the SDGs that they have put out, the Sustainability Developmental Goals, have really had a profound impact. I think that there are a lot of universities now that really look at those goals and try to understand how can we be competitive and how can we contribute to reaching these goals that are in place. The last point I would like to make is, from the Global South, I think that there needs to be a greater willingness when working cross-country to really be forthright in terms of here's what we can offer. That is, I think that there needs to be greater recognition from the Global North in terms of the indigenous knowledge systems that are available in some of these Global South partner countries and what they can bring to the table. If you go in and you work with compatriots from parts of Asia or Africa, to expect them to have the same knowledge set and the same research capabilities as what you may have in the Global North is probably not proper. So again, it's about perspective. It's about recognizing what this partner institute, these partner researchers can bring to the table. Another concern that I think, again, needs to be addressed is even when this does occur, and let's say you have a grant in place, and I talked about the challenges of grant funding across countries earlier, often these grants are originated in the Global North, and they reach out and say, hey, here's a bunch of countries in the Global South, we would like you to participate. But at the end of the day, those grants are being run, and ultimately the publications that come out of it are being published through those researchers in the Global North. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but I do think, again, it presents challenges for those doing science and research in the Global South to get the recognition in order to move up that level and get that equitable treatment, that equitable recognition that is so critical for the rest of the world to recognize their capabilities and their potential. So I do think, again, there are a lot of challenges inherent in this, but I am really pleased to say that I think we are moving in the right direction. Just like we've talked about open science a lot, I do think there is much more recognition today than perhaps in the past in terms of what can be accomplished and what the really positive outcomes can be through these cross-country collaborations. So with that, I'll finish up. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you specifically highlighting that about the fee waiver policies in the developing nations, about the openness for open access. Yes, definitely it is required. Before going, there are a few questions specifically by audience, but I would like to take one question that has a very interesting relation along with the various cultural domain and geopolitical tensions coming from this collaborative research. So when we talk about this, this increasing attacks on academic freedom, in the context of rising decibels levels of the hyper-nationalists who are harassed on the issues of the religion, immigration, refugees, or even climate change. The question arises here that how universities collectively navigate geopolitical tensions to foster collaboration, research initiative with institutions across the diverse geopolitical landscape. I would like to request Professor VESSELIN to put light on this.
Thank you very much, Professor Pandey. Indeed, actually, what you just said is another excellent argument. Why do we need openness? Why do we need to share quickly scientific knowledge? exactly as to combat all the conspiracies and all the nationalisms and all the populisms. The way populism and nationalism works and conspiracies work is through, putting fog on the science, trying to manipulate, trying to deviate people's mind from what the science is saying. We remember COVID-19 and the conspiracies there. We know the conspiracies and lies coming out of politicians that want to stay in power forever and never change. And the only way to fight against those politicians and against those conspiracies is the open science. In fact, publishing quickly in a way that it is accessible to the rest of the world, for all people in the world to read what the latest science says, is the way. Absolutely, you are right, Professor Pandey, to reduce the other source, the manipulative populist and nationalist discourse. So you're absolutely right on that. Let me add something to what my colleague just said as well, and I'm in full support of those incentives that the universities can give for researchers going to open access publishing. In fact, yes, promotion of faculty could be one, but also the ranking agencies should be concerned with it, because we always told to publish in Scopus Journal. But if there is an additional incentive, in addition to Scopus Journal, also to have publication in open access, that's how university leaders can incentivize the faculty to publish. And there are, in addition to the challenges, Professor Pandey, you mentioned, we have also the challenge of artificial intelligence. And in fact, here comes a big question where we still need to figure out how to regulate artificial intelligence. But the major concern with open science has always been, what if the discovery we are making in our laboratory end up in the hands of the bad guys, in the hands of the terrorists? What will, and we know that the invention of the nuclear reaction ended up in the military hands and atomic bombs were produced. We might find that any discovery might also end up in the hands of those who will misuse or abuse that discovery. And for that matter, again, it is through the regulation. That's why we need to regulate the artificial intelligence. There is a discussion about global artificial intelligence observatory. In a way, again, it is not to restrict the openness, rather to utilize the openness as a counter argument and as a way to say to all other institutes and researchers and laboratories what we discovered and how we together as a unity in collaboration think about the possible negative effects from our discovery. So that's how I see the future of regulating AI without limiting openness in science. And I would strongly simply encourage all researchers to use, for example, ENAGO Academy is a way quickly to get something published, which will be open access to all. In the way the discussion about North and South is interesting, but again, the solution is the open science. The way the universities share for free their research outputs is what will help a lot of science in the South. In fact, if we look at all the climate change propositions, how to make technology access quickly, how to give every new discovery in renewable energy, in electric mobility, in reducing the emissions of CO2 available for free for the rest of the world, is the way to go. That will be the real help for the global South. Open
Thank you very much, Professor POPOVSKI. Thank you very much. We have a few questions from the side of the audience. The question is very interesting, and I know I can't stop myself to mix in few questions together. The question is that what are the challenges that how universities in the developed nation they can provide opportunities or can provide a support, extended support for creating open science indexing database like Scopus and Web of Science. And what are the challenges that global North researchers face when they try to collaborate with their peers from the global South, specifically when these institutions are beyond, say, top 10 and top 5% of in their home state? I would like to take opinion of Professor Anupama Prakash on this particular point. Professor Prakash. If Professor Prakash, she's not available, I would like to request to answer this question by Suresh Samuelji. Can you highlight on the challenges that how universities in developed countries can support for extending, for creating an open science index database like Scopus and Web of Science? Professor Samuel.
I think that's a very interesting question, and I think that will create a lot of equitable access and approach. And Professor Anupama has come. But so that is something that we should really think about. I mean, developed nations, if they can come about with the database, excuse me, which would really have access, which can really be made access for the global South or developing countries, I think that will create a good access for further collaboration and further extending in terms of the research activities. That is an excellent thought coming out with this type of a specific database, which can be having an open access to everyone.
Thank you, Samuelji. Professor Prakash, since you're back here, I would like to take just 1 minute. I know it's a 1 minute question, an interesting question, which is specifically talking about the challenges faced by the North, global North researcher when they try to collaborate with their peers in the global South. And specifically when these institutions are beyond, say top 10 and top 5% in their home state, what type of challenges they are facing?
No, thank you. Sorry, my connection had dropped. But at the moment, I'll just tell you, I am so keen to see a really strong collaboration coming from the North to the South, global North to the global South. I'm sitting with a database that I have put together of over 200 universities in India that have potential to collaborate with my university over here, for example. But I think there are many challenges. I think even if we have policies and even if we have understandings between two universities on collaboration, those collaborations that will be successful are the ones that work at the grassroots level. An individual faculty from the global North with an individual faculty from the global South, when that collaboration is robust, when that is incentivized, when that trust base will build, then we'll have meaningful collaborations. And it only takes a few people from both sides to build that trust base and move forward. And then as administrators, it's our responsibility to remove the barriers for them. Because otherwise what will happen is we'll have policies, we'll have memorandums of agreements, we will have good handshakes, but it may not result in research collaborations that we'd like to see. So I think making sure that our faculty who are at the grassroots level doing the research, wanting to collaborate, that we serve as the facilitator.
It is really very important point which you had raised, that how you mapped the institution in India for the possible collaboration. And definitely it can be a path-breaking opportunities to work together as a global South and global North. They can work together and create some meaningful inputs in the research and development. Yes, we try to discuss again that problems are there. There are many full dimensions problems are there. There's a one last question, although we are timid, I'd like to one last question open. That's a nice question which has been asked by the audience. The last question, that if people are doing project with their own money and not a highly funded project, and it is not a usual scenario, especially in economically developed nation, the cost of open access publishing become a major barrier. What can be done on this? Can I ask this question to Professor DERICK or Professor Suresh, anyone who would like to? DERICK.
Hi, yeah, I mean, if I understood the question right, it's really about self-funded research and the ability to publish, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, I think we mentioned a couple of times the idea that to publish, it's almost become the norm today, and this is not historically true. That again, a lot of journals charge these article processing charges or article processing fees, which can be quite significant. You know, several hundred to several thousand U.S. dollars. And so I do think that if you're self-funding, or again, you're coming from a developing nation, you can reach out. You can request that those charges be reduced or perhaps omitted. And some journals will acquiesce to that. They will agree. Some journals do not. But certainly that would be the first step, I think, is to just make that query and see if it's possible to waive the fees.
thank you, Professor Derrick. Thank you very much. As we have now exceeded the time given, let me conclude what exactly we have discussed here. As we conclude our discussion today, let us reframe our commitment to the principle of open science and collaborations among universities. The challenges face our world are complex and multi-phase, requiring innovative approaches and collective actions. By embracing open science and fostering collaboration, we can unlock the full potential of research to address global challenges and build a more sustainable and equitable future for generations to come. I'm thanking to Professor Anupma Prakash for her valuable comments, to Professor Suresh Samuel from Vinayaka Mission for his valuable comment, to my dear friend Derrick for his valuable feedback comments, and my dear friend VESSELIN POPOVSKI to help me to explore this particular area as such. Thank you all, our panelists, our IT team, and other participants for your valuable insights and contributions. Let us continue to work together towards a future where research knows no boundaries and serve the betterment of all humanities. Thank you very much.